Well, here we are today with Paul Gaurnier, a member of the greatest generation. Born in 1923 in Ithaca, New York, he has lived a life of honor and achievement and love. And we're going to talk to him today about his life. Paul, welcome. And where would you like to start, Paul?
Wherever your interest is. You're right, I was born in a college town, it's called. Cornell University was founded in the 1860s there, and that was a very prime situation in a small town. We also had a national cash register factory and a automobile chain factory, I forget the name of it, which was very important because during the Depression, when I was 9, 10, 11, 12, those two factories almost went down completely, and it affected everything in town. And of course, Cornell kept going on. There were people with enough money to come to Cornell in the 30s. So that's why we became very conscious of being a college town. I started, as a matter of fact, because money was short, I started caddying at age 10 and had to go quite a ways to get to the country club. But then in the later, 3 years later, I set pins and regularly and I also bagged potatoes in the Atlantic Pacific grocery store. My point I'm making is that it was during the Depression. It was a bad period of time.
And on top of that, the weather stunk. It was snowing all the time up there, right?
Well, we had a lot of snow. Not as bad as Syracuse, but we had a lot of snow.
What did you do for fun? Did you?
Well, it's pretty typical. I think that when I had time, I went swimming a lot. And oddly enough, the members of the Ithaca Country Club would allow us to borrow their clubs, and Monday morning and Thursday morning, we were allowed to play caddy day. So I started playing golf early at age 10, and that I've loved it ever since. But I guess swimming and I loved bowling and loved setting pins. As a matter of fact, was fun for me. So that was pretty much what I did.
Pretty cool. Any notable friends? Any buddies that you?
Oh yes, we had. I can remember Bob Beardsley and Lawrence Gray and Alex Wilcox. A few of those guys. Gosh, only knows where they are. But yeah, we had. There were 4 or 5 of us that were about the same age that grew up together and went to school together. And then, of course, don't forget when war came, we all were separated, and after the war, hardly any of us ever got back to see one another again. But anyway, yes, we had good friends. Yes.
So you went off to you lived there just about your whole childhood, right?
I lived there until age 17, and then I changed my birth certificate. Did a crappy job, but the Royal Canadian Air Force didn't care. They needed bodies, so I joined the Royal Canadian Air Force in May of 1941.
So you went to there, but then what happened?
Well, when Pearl Harbor came, I hadn't finished flight training yet. So 8 of us were allowed. 8 of us asked to get out, and the Royal Canadian Air Force agreed. And but 5 of the 8 had 2 years of college or more, and the 3 of us didn't have any college. And in the early days, you had to have 2 years of college to get into the Navy program. So, but the Army Air Corps, in those days, Army Air Corps, said, okay, they would accept me. We went down to Buffalo and went through the rigmarole. But then when I was supposed to apply and show up in Binghamton, New York, to go ahead and go to flight training down at Montgomery, or the pre-flight, they said, oh, we're so crowded, you have to go home. Well, by that time, all of the mothers of my friends had said, hey, you were such a big shot, you've gone the Royal Canadian Air Force, now we're in war, my son Johnny has been drafted, and now you're home here. And so I said to my dad, who had driven me down, I said, I just can't bear going back. So I went down one flight, and the Marine Corps was there, and I said, do you have anything to offer a non-college person? They said, yeah, we have an enlisted program that you can go through flight training. I said, fine. So I signed up for it. The problem was you had to go through boot camp, and I'm telling you, boot camp, I think if I had to do over, I would not have done it. But anyway, so graduated from boot camp, and they sent me, sure enough, up to Quantico to start the whole process, and I flunked my eye exam. So there I was, now a private in the Marine Corps, and not going to flight training. So that's how I wound up as a regular Marine for 4 full years.
So from Quantico, they sent you to the West Coast, or what did they do?
No, from Quantico I went to radio school, then graduated from radio school and went out to the West Coast as actually as a code guy, because unfortunately it turned out that I was good on the circuit, they called it. So there went any chance of getting into the air wing. So anyway, then when I went to Guadalcanal as a replacement in August 28, 1942, because it was day before my birthday, I got there, and within 2 or 3 weeks they asked for volunteers for radio gunners because they'd lost so many. So I said, here I am, I went to radio school, and here's my logbook, I flew. So of course I was accepted, and I stayed as a radio gunner from then on.
So what was your first action? Where would you actually fight for the first time?
Probably early September of 1942 at Guadalcanal, as a rear gunner in an SBD and a dive bomber, attacking a Japanese heavy cruiser.
And you were how old then?
I just turned 19. I was 19 on August 29. I made 76 missions in that type of aircraft. Yeah.
19 years old.
Yep.
You probably weren't scared, huh?
I was scared. I was scared all the time. But let me tell you something interesting. And for those of you who might read this or hear this, and you're interested in history, the early books will show this. We were shelled by battleships and heavy cruisers for night after night after night for 3 months. So it didn't make a difference what your job was. The real problem was this intense, heavy 15-inch shelling that we went through for over 90 days. Wow. Guadalcanal, all of us were surprised we lasted.
And what was the worst time? I mean, when were you when did things look kind of bleak?
In October and November, when they were determined to take the island back, and they came down 25,000 troop replacement, and that was a very difficult time for all of it. It was an interesting time for me. We went right up and down the troop ships, and I was just firing into all these people just constantly. And of course they lost a lot of people, but they didn't take back the island, but it was touch and go for a while, frankly.
That was pretty brutal, huh?
It was very brutal, yeah.
Well, I asked you about friends in high school. What about some really military buddies that you loved?
Well, I lost my 2 closest friends. Both
geez.
of them were killed, and both of them were killed with my involvement. The first guy, Frank, I don't want to lose his last name. His relatives might see this. Frank had not flown, and I had diarrhea, and I was sitting on the latrine, and the Japanese were coming in with bombers and Zeros protecting them, and for some reason the coast watchers had missed this, so Sullivan, my pilot, came rushing. Paul, we gotta go. And I said, I can't go, I just can't get off of there. Take Frank. So he grabbed Frank, and they took off, and they were shot down about a mile off the runway.
Wow.
And I didn't see it, I was still sitting there, but everybody else saw it. Then the other guy, Gene, I'll just say Faze, I won't use his last name. He and I, in February, I think it was, both of us were being evacuated out. We both were just hit very badly with malaria and dengue fever, and we were useless. I had lost 40 pounds, by the way, at that point after 6 months. Anyway, so we got down there to the plane taking us to New Hebrides, to Espiritu Santos, And there was only one seat left. Of course, we both thought we were privates. It turned out we were higher rank, but the administrations at New Hebrides hadn't bothered to inform us. But anyway, so I lost a flip. One of the pilots there had a coin that we flipped, and I lost a flip. And Gene won, and he got on that plane, and the plane never made it. So when I went back, where I was staying, the tent I was staying in, had just gone through a mortar attack, and everything was destroyed. So in one day, my luck stayed with me.
Wow. That's just, and there's not much you can say about something like that.
No, that was pure luck.
It's just luck or fate or whatever you want to call it.
But both of those guys I was very close to, so I felt terrible about Frank, but nothing I could do about it. Of course, I thought the world of Sully too, but that was it.
So then the war continued. What happened to you?
I went back. I was in a hospital there in New Caledonia for a while. My group went to slowly but surely went to New Zealand to reconstitute. But then when they were going to go home, they swung by New Caledonia to pick up those of us who had been hospitalized. Got there, and then some orders got changed, and at American Samoa we were pulled off, and we started training again to go up to Tarawa. So then we went to one of the small islands in Wallis Islands, and we trained for protecting watching for doing sub patrols and making sure that we kept the skies clear for the Tarawa operation. So by that time, by the time that was through, I'd been 2 years. So then I came back to the States.
They came you back, yeah. Then you got out. What
No,
happened in the States?
that was 1944, and I had joined as a regular Marine for 4 years. So after my 30-day hospital leave and whatnot, I was I had to report in up at Santa Barbara, Goleta, California, and where I was the senior NCO for both the turret gunners and the radio gunners on both the TBFs and the SBDs that we were reconstituting to go on a carrier to go back out to the Pacific. And one day I collapsed and wound up in the hospital, and in the Long Beach Naval Hospital, and that started a period of 13 months in the hospital.
Wow. So then that's when you got out after that.
I had 3 months to do before I could get out of the service, and I spent the 3 months leading. I was one of 7 guys, NCOs, leading groups of 50 Marines through for their discharge processing. And so I had to spend 3 months at Camp Elliott there at San Diego doing that. Then I got out on January 28 of 1946.
And what was your rank then?
5 Stripe Sergeant. I was one. I had been in a slot for the Master Sergeant at Santa Barbara, but I wasn't in it long enough, so I didn't retain it. So when I found, in fact, I was a little embarrassed. I told everybody at the hospital I was a Master Sergeant. It turned out I was a 5 Striper.
What is that? Is that better than a Master Sergeant?
No, in those days they only had the six stripes. Yeah.
Ah, okay.
Now they have 7, 8, and 9, I think, but I'm not sure. But
so you end up going to Korea.
no, I ended up coming back to Ithaca and going to Cornell.
Oh.
And graduating in 1950. But what was interesting is because I'd been enlisted in World War II, I thought, well, just for the fun of it, I'll go through ROTC, the senior 2 years as a veteran. I didn't have to do the 4 years. Just go through and get commissioned just for the fun of it. So I got commissioned in 1949 and graduated in 1950. Thought nothing of it. Interviewed for a job with Luby's Cafeteria in Miami and a job with the Harrisburger Hotel in Harrisburg. And we're sitting there eating, I'll never forget it, strawberry chiffon pie and a cup of coffee. And this guy comes out from the other room and he says, "Lieutenant Gaurnier?" And I said, "Well, yeah, but I'm not a lieutenant." He said, "Yeah." he said, one of the captains from ROTC is on the phone and says, you've been recalled. I said, what? And that was how I wound up in Korea, as a machine gun platoon commander. Wow.
Was that rough or was that easy?
Not easy, not nearly as bad as World War II, but getting shot at is never easy.
No, that's for sure. Yeah. And you were there for what, a couple of years?
1 year.
1 year.
I did. It was 1 full year.
So then you had the 50s. What did you do with the 50s?
Let's see. I came back. I decided to try to be safe and not get sent to Korea again. So I asked to stay in Japan. So I did 1 year in Japan, and transferred to the Quartermaster Corps, and I was a warehouse officer. And I'd only been the warehouse officer down at the dock, and but I loved that job. We had 14 Americans and about 340 Japanese employees, and of course unloading the ships and storing and all that. And I was the only officer there. And I ate lunch most days with one of my friends who was the warehouse officer for the frozen foods, and Joe Cobb. But anyway, so one day the CEO came down, a guy by the name of Colonel Fairbrother, and said, okay, Lieutenant, you've been here long enough, we've seen what you can do, now you're going to be the budget officer. So I was brought up to the depot, the Kobe depot, to be the warehouse officer. So that's what I did for the next year. And then I was kicked out because I had too many points and people were waiting for housing, and of course I got housing because of my combat time in Korea, so I got housing immediately. So by the way, I was the father of a new child I had never seen, and he was he was born in December of '51, and it was way later, it was October or so it was of '52, so it was quite a while before I got to see my new son.
Yeah, we haven't brought up family yet. How did the romance go there? Where did this? How did this all come about?
The romance was interesting. I married the nurse on my ward back in Long Beach Naval Hospital, and I remember I got there in early November of '44, and when I woke up one day, I'd been kind of half semi-conscious. My body had just given up, is what had happened in World War II. Just collapsed between the malaria and the dengue fever and probably rheumatic fever. They weren't sure of that, but I was finally diagnosed when I got out. By the way, I didn't say this. I received 50% disability for 4 years for combat fatigue. Now they call it post-traumatic stress, but anyway, I received the 50% disability, and it was nice for my going back to college. I was under a different law, 346, instead of public law 16, and all my books were paid for. It was really pretty good deal. But anyway.
So Paul, you've had quite a life. We're moving right along here. We're getting up to about the present. You've been through wars. You've had a successful career as a professor. I said, but now there is another part to your life that we haven't hit on yet. You had another family, didn't you?
Yes, I did. Even though I certainly loved my first wife, but we drifted apart, my fault, because of traveling so often and being out of town so often on first the military, of course, and then consulting. But anyway, we were divorced, and I remarried to a lovely lady with 3 children. And one of the most wonderful things that I can look back on in my life is that those children, who are now, of course, in their 60s and 60s, those people get along. The 6 of them get along, and one of the pictures that I have there that you are going to put in this video, the 3 of them on one side, the 3 of them on the other, and they're just wonderful people, and they get along as a family.
Well, that's not true of all families. So
no, it's not.
I'd say that's quite an achievement, Paul. Well, you know, that's a good jumping off spot about your other family. You know, you're 96 years old. Not many people make 96 years old, Paul. What do you want to reflect on? Looking back over your life, and you know, what is it really a central thing that you really want to share?
Well, I want to share that obviously I do some looking backwards, and obviously I sit here in the chair and think about some of these things. First of all, I've used the word luck several times. I have escaped several really, really difficult combat situations, and I can't explain it. I don't know why. So obviously I've given some thought to that, and I think that probably it's human nature as you grow older that you wonder, okay, is there really what follows? Is there an aftermath? I'm not a strong Christian, and sometimes I envy those who are strong Christians, but at this stage I'm not. But yes, that's what I wonder. I frankly wonder what comes next.
So that's great, and that seems pretty normal. But it's great that you got it on your mind. So of all the things you did, so many achievements, what are you most proud of?
Well, I'm most proud of that I was willing to give up a highly successful military career. I had been promoted ahead of time 2 different times as a commissioned officer, and I was willing to give that up in order to take care of the kids as far as college education goes, and it worked out for everybody. That all 6 of these people have gone to college.
That's spectacular. Well, I can tell you what I'm most proud of for you, Paul, is I can't believe you're 96 and you can still hit the ball about 175 yards, and you can still putt. So that's what I'm most proud of for you. So to close, Paul, you know, you've lived this magnificent, successful life. What's your advice for the future generation? Someday, this little video maybe will be viewed, maybe 10 years, 20 years, who knows, 50 years. This is digital. It'll last a long time. There's going to be some young boy or girl, and some relative, or maybe even a stranger. What would your advice be for those people in the future?
Well, I'm sorry to get so serious, but I believe that the Depression had one advantage to people like myself. We just took it for granted that you had to work hard to have anything. To have any money, you had to work. And I believe that working hard is certainly a darn good piece of advice to anybody.
So, don't let the robots do it in the future? Is that what you're telling them?
Well, yeah. I'm afraid things have changed, and some of the things come so easily. As you know, I have a smartphone. It's just remarkable what it can do. But one thing I will say, at age 96, people who say, oh, for the good old days, no, they've missed the boat. These are the good old days right now that we're living in right now. Things are just, it's wonderful with all the technology and all the capabilities we have to communicate with each other. I message with the 6 kids constantly, and the grandchildren quite often. I mean, I'm in touch with, even though I live out here in southeastern Arizona, I'm in touch with my family. And through the communication, through the smartphones. It's wonderful.
Well, it's a credit to you, Paul, that they want to communicate with you as well. And that makes a pretty good example of a pretty great dad. So with that, this is Paul Gaurnier. This is his 96 years. I hope everyone has enjoyed it. And for now, goodbye.
Thank you, Mr. McKellar. Thank you.